My name is Clara Monroe, and if you had told me 3 months ago that my own brother would drag my reputation across a bank lobby in front of 15 strangers, I would have said you misunderstood him. I would have defended him. I would have told you that Everett was arrogant, yes, and obsessed with money, yes, but cruel, no. At least that's what I used to believe. Before the day he stood between me and a simple cash withdrawal, raised his voice just enough for an audience to form, and asked whether I had finally run out of people willing to bail me out. I didn't need a bailout. I needed $80, just 80. Not for me, but for Mrs. Dalton, the widowed woman next door whose furnace had died 2 nights earlier. She was too embarrassed to ask anyone else for help, and I couldn't stand the thought of her sitting in a cold house another day. But Everett wasn't interested in reasons. He was interested in reminding everyone that he worked at the bank and I did not. It wasn't the words he used. It was the tone he crafted, loud enough to humiliate, but soft enough to pretend innocence. When he said, "Clara, you really should learn to manage what little you have," I felt something inside me shift. Not break, shift. A slow, heavy slide of something that had been waiting years to move. And I remember thinking, this is not about money. This is about every birthday he forgot, every holiday where he and our sister Laurel took the head of the table while I cleared dishes, every conversation where I was treated like the quiet understudy in a family that only applauded the stars. Everett didn't know who he was talking to, not the version of me he'd stored in his mind. Because while he liked to picture me as the sister who never earned enough, who lived in a small rental home, who survived on side gigs as a consultant, he never asked what I actually did. He never asked how I built a data analysis system with a former colleague, a system we licensed quietly to 3 investment firms. He never asked why I stayed silent about my finances. Silence was a shield I wore comfortably, until that day. That morning, something else happened, something Everett never saw coming. When I stepped away from him and sat down in the waiting area, staring at the digital glow of the system I helped build, I realized I had spent years shrinking myself so my family wouldn't feel threatened. I realized how often I had chosen peace over dignity. I realized how long I had allowed myself to be the quietest person in a room full of people who mistook quiet for weak. And then I made a decision that would flip everything. The bank system wasn't connected to my work, but my work was connected to the fund. And the fund could move money. Large money. Life-altering money. Money that caused corporate branches to straighten in their chairs and executives to clear their schedules. I initiated a withdrawal request, not for $80, but for $3.2 billion from the institutional account tied to my system's returns. It was routine, it was procedural, and it was powerful. Within minutes, the energy in the lobby changed. Tellers exchanged looks. Everett glanced toward the back room, then toward the front doors, as if expecting a storm to enter. The manager stepped out, confusion tightening the lines around his mouth. Then a suited man appeared, regional director based on his badge. He scanned the lobby until he found me. And that's when Everett's world began to tilt. The director asked if I preferred to speak in private. He addressed me as Ms. Monroe with measured respect. And Everett stood behind him, silent color draining from his face, as he tried to piece together a puzzle he didn't even know existed. But that was only the beginning, because money wasn't the revenge. Money was the door, and I had just opened it. The regional director, his name was Anthony Reed, guided me into a glass-walled conference room overlooking the lobby. Everett stayed outside, hovering like a child peering through a keyhole. I could practically feel his panic beating against the glass. He had always believed he perched at the top of our family's hierarchy because he earned the highest salary and drove the most expensive car. But hierarchy bends quickly when truth steps into the room. Anthony sat across from me, placed a folder on the table, and spoke with a calm precision that told me he handled crisis well. "Ms. Monroe, the request you submitted triggered an institutional alert. Before we proceed, I want to confirm that the number is correct." I nodded. "It is." He didn't flinch. Not outwardly, but his gaze sharpened. He asked a few procedural questions, all of which I answered steadily. I wasn't nervous, the system was legitimate, the money was legitimate, and I was done minimizing myself. Then came the moment Everett would never forget. The conference room door opened. Not by my request, but because the compliance officer needed the account holder present for verification. and Everett, still believing he was the authoritative sibling, walked in uninvited. He looked at me like he was seeing a stranger. Not the sister he used to pat on the head dismissively. Not the one he used as a contrast to make himself look successful. This was the first time he'd ever looked confused in my presence. "Clara," he said, forcing a laugh, "is this some kind of mistake?" Anthony turned to him. "Mr. Monroe, this is a restricted meeting. Please wait outside." But Everett didn't move. He pointed at me like he was searching for an anchor in a storm. "She doesn't have that kind of money. She can barely—" The sentence fractured. He realized he had nearly humiliated himself in front of the man who outranked everyone in the building. Anthony raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Monroe, your assumptions are irrelevant here." I spoke calmly. "Everett, I don't need your help. Please step outside." He opened his mouth again, but something fear maybe pressed his jaw shut. He stepped out slowly, like someone who had been living in the wrong story for years and suddenly realized it. Once alone, Anthony completed the verification, then quietly informed me that an internal review would be launched not because of the money, but because of the conduct displayed toward a client during a transaction. He didn't name Everett directly, but he didn't need to. When I returned to the lobby, Everett followed me like a shadow. "What the hell was that, Clara? Where did you even get?" I stopped walking and turned to him. "Everett, you don't get to ask me questions you never cared about before today." He froze. I walked out of the bank without raising my voice, without gloating, without offering him the comfort of an explanation. But consequences don't wait for comfort. That evening my phone buzzed relentlessly. My older sister Laurel texted first accusations wrapped in false concern. My mother called sounding breathless. My father left a message telling me we needed to straighten out whatever rumor was spreading. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about what Everett might face. And that was the moment I knew the ground beneath all of us was beginning to crack. My parents showed up at my house the next evening unannounced, anxious, carrying the kind of urgency usually reserved for medical emergencies. Laurel arrived moments later, wearing a tailored coat and an expression that could slice glass. No one asked how I was. No one asked about my day. They cared about one thing controlling the narrative before it reached anyone who mattered to them. We sat in the living room. My mother clutched her hands in her lap, twisting her wedding ring. My father cleared his throat with the weight of a man preparing to deliver instructions rather than ask questions. Laurel didn't bother pretending. "Clara, what did you do to Everett?" "I didn't do anything to him," I said. "He did something to me, in public." My father leaned forward. "Your brother says you caused a disruption at the bank, that you—" "No," I interrupted. "He caused the disruption. He humiliated me in front of strangers. He's just not used to consequences." Laurel scoffed. "Oh, please. Everett says you're overreacting because you're embarrassed about your finances." I looked at her for a long moment. "Is that what he told you?" "He said you made a scene." I laughed softly, not because it was funny, but because it made everything suddenly so clear. "If you want to know what actually happened, I'll tell you." But they didn't want the truth. They wanted reassurance that their family image was intact. So I handed my father a printed folder I had prepared earlier, the first in a series of dominoes that had been waiting years to fall. He scanned the documents, confusion shifting into disbelief. They weren't about Everett. They were about Laurel. Laurel's voice cracked. "What is that?" I watched her face as the truth dawned on her. The unauthorized withdrawals from our parents' small family trust. The fabricated vendor account. The pattern of transactions too consistent to be accidental. Her husband's signature forged on 3 documents. Dates lining up perfectly with her luxury purchases. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. "Laurel, tell me this isn't real." But Laurel had no words. Only silence, a silence louder than any confession. My father's hands trembled as he set down the papers. "How long?" "2 years," I said, "maybe longer." Laurel shot to her feet. "You had no right to dig through." "It wasn't digging," I said. "It was noticing. Something this family never bothered to do when it came to me." The room fractured. Years of favoritism, entitlement, and selective blindness swelled to the surface. My mother whispered, "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" "Because you wouldn't have believed me," I said. "You never do." Laurel stormed toward the door, desperate to escape the weight of exposure. My father followed her, calling her name. My mother stayed behind, staring at me as if seeing a stranger she had raised but never truly known. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. "Clara, what happens now?" I stood, feeling the steadiness of a woman who had been underestimated for too long. "Now, We let the truth do what it does. Because revenge, I was learning, wasn't always an explosion. Sometimes it was simply handing people the mirror they spent their whole lives avoiding. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was anxious, but because everything finally made sense in a way I had been too exhausted to articulate before. My family wasn't reacting to truth, they were reacting to exposure, to the erosion of an image they had polished for decades. My father's reputation as the steady head of the Monroe household, my mother's reputation as the keeper of order Laurel's, as the golden child Everett's, as the responsible son. None of it was built on honesty. It was built on what they hoped the world believed. The next morning, I found Everett sitting in his car across the street from my house, as though proximity might grant him access to answers. His shoulders were tense, and when I stepped outside, he scrambled out of the driver's seat like a man trying to outrun shame. "Clara, we need to talk." "No," I said calmly. "You need to listen." He swallowed hard. And for the first time in my life, I saw something I never expected in him. Hesitation. He followed me inside like someone entering a courtroom bracing for a verdict he wasn't sure he could handle. He sat on the couch, elbows on his knees, jaw tight. "I didn't mean to embarrass you at the bank." "Yes, you did," I said plainly. "You always mean it. That's the difference." His eyes flicked upward, surprised by my bluntness. "You target the people you assume won't fight back," I continued. "You learned it from Dad. You perfected it on me." He opened his mouth, but nothing came. I sat across from him. "Everett, I didn't ask for this conflict. You created it in front of a room full of strangers, and now it's out of your control." His voice cracked slightly. "Anthony, the regional director, he filed a formal complaint against me. Clara, they're talking about suspending me." I watched his panic build, but I didn't soften. "Everett, you misused your authority. You publicly shamed a client. You tampered with a withdrawal request before it was even processed. The bank isn't punishing you out of spite. They're protecting themselves." He ran a hand through his hair. "I can't lose this job." "You weren't worried about your job when you humiliated me." Silence collapsed between us. He finally looked at me, not like a sister, not like an inconvenience, but like a mirror. A mirror reflecting parts of himself he had spent years avoiding. "Why didn't you ever tell us you were successful?" he whispered. I let out a quiet breath. "Because I was tired of competing in a race I never wanted to join. You and Laurel turned everything into a scoreboard. I chose peace." He sank back into the couch. Is there anything I can do?" "For what I asked, to fix your job, to fix our relationship, to fix who you've been." His eyes filled with something raw, "to make things right." I didn't respond. Not immediately. Because forgiveness, real forgiveness, wasn't accessible yet, not when the wounds were still open. Before I could form an answer, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "I know what Laurel did, and what your parents hid. If you want the rest, come to me." Attached was an address, a retirement community on the other side of town. My heartbeat stilled. Everett leaned forward. "Who is it?" I stared at the screen, a chill moving through me. Someone who knows more than they should. And for the first time, I realized Laurel's fraud wasn't the deepest secret in our family. It was only the first crack. The retirement community sat on a quiet hill overlooking the city, the kind of place families choose when they want comfort without guilt. Residents strolled tree-lined paths or gathered on benches in the courtyard. But the person I came to meet wasn't outside basking in the sun. She was waiting in a private lounge off the main hallway, her posture straight and her expression sharper than someone her age should naturally hold. Her name was Margaret Ellsworth, and before she even spoke, I sensed she was the kind of woman who never wasted a word. "You're Clara," she said, as if confirming a long-studied detail. "You look like your grandmother." That stopped me cold. "My grandmother's been dead for years," I said carefully. "You knew her." "I knew far more than she ever told your family." She gestured for me to sit. I did, keeping my breathing steady, though my instincts were humming with warning. Margaret folded her hands, gaze fixed on mine. "I saw what happened at the bank," she continued. "And the fallout. I knew eventually someone in your family would force everything buried to come up again." I frowned. "I don't understand." She leaned in. "Your grandmother left behind a will, a second will." My pulse spiked. "No," I said. "We saw the will. She left the house to my parents and split her savings among the three of us." "That was the official version," Margaret said softly, "not the real one." My throat went dry. Why would there be two? Because your grandmother didn't trust them, and she shouldn't have. A tension spread down my spine. What did the real will say? Margaret studied me as though measuring whether I could withstand the next truth. She left everything to you. The air vanished from my lungs. That's not possible, I whispered. Clara, your grandmother adored you, she said. You were the only one who spent time with her without expecting something. You were the only one who visited when she was sick, the only one who helped her organize her finances, the only one who shared her interest in numbers. She saw what your family refused to see. Why didn't anyone tell me? Margaret's expression hardened. Because your parents hid it. They took the second will, destroyed it, and filed the first one. They didn't want you to inherit the house or the savings. They didn't want the other children to resent them. And they didn't want you to know how deeply your grandmother believed in you. My breath shook. Why are you telling me this now? Because your grandmother made me promise that when the family started to fracture, and she knew it would, I would come forward. She said you'd be the only one strong enough to face the truth and do something about it. I pressed my fingers to my forehead. Do something about it, like what? She wanted you to take back what was stolen from you. Legally, publicly, permanently. Suddenly, the weight of everything, Everett's arrogance, Laurel's fraud, my parents' silence tightened into one unbreakable thread. They never saw me because they never wanted to. And now, for the first time, I held proof that the blindness was deliberate. I stood slowly. Margaret, do you still have anything? Documents, letters, anything, proving the second will existed. Her eyes softened. I have everything. Hope and fury collided in my chest. I'll send you copies by morning, she said gently. But Clara, once you open this door, the entire family will turn on you. I know I said, but they already did. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the storm. I was ready to be the lightning. The next morning, I found a thick envelope on my doorstep, Margaret's handwriting across the front in looping cursive. Inside were photocopies of documents that shouldn't exist. A handwritten letter from my grandmother dated months before her death, stating clearly, unmistakably, that she intended me to inherit her home, her land, and the bulk of her financial assets. Her reasoning filled a full page, and every line felt like a wound reopening and healing at the same time. She praised my integrity, my diligence, my quiet strength. She wrote about how overlooked I had been, how she feared the family's favoritism would stifle me, how she saw in me a kind of resilience no one else appreciated. She said she wanted me to have a foundation strong enough to build a life without their shadows. I stopped reading halfway through, fighting tears I didn't want to shed. Everett and Laurel never visited her in the hospital. My parents visited, but only briefly, always rushing, always focused elsewhere. I had been the one by her bedside, the one reading her old journals aloud, the one helping her catalog decades of financial records. She used to smile and say, "You see things others don't, Clara. One day it'll save you." I didn't know that day would come this way. I took a long breath and held the letter tight as footsteps approached my porch. Everett, again. He looked exhausted. "Clara, I got a call from HR. They want me to come in for a formal review. Can you talk to them? Clarify things." "No," I said gently, "I can't interfere." He exhaled shakily. I could lose everything. A part of me felt sympathy, but another part remembered every time he dismissed me, mocked me, used me as the safe target for his frustrations. "Everett, I didn't create your behavior. I'm not responsible for its consequences." His eyes narrowed, not in anger but in recognition. "You've changed." "No," I corrected. I stopped shrinking. He swallowed. "Is this because of me?" "It's because of all of you." I walked past him and headed toward my car. He followed. "Where are you going?" "To speak with an attorney." His face blanched. "Why?" I turned, meeting his eyes with calm certainty. "Because the inheritance wasn't just unfair. It was illegal. And I have proof." His voice cracked. "Clara, don't do this." "You didn't ask me not to hurt the family," I said. "You asked me not to hurt the structure that benefited you." He stepped back like the truth had struck him physically. I got into my car and drove away. The attorney's office was quiet, lined with framed degrees and softly lit lamps. My attorney, Helen Vargas, read through the documents with the precision of someone who understood both law and human betrayal. When she finished, she looked up. "Clara, this is significant. If these originals still exist, you could challenge the estate in court. My parents will deny everything. Denial won't matter if we find the evidence." Has anyone attempted to contact you recently? Anyone from your family besides your siblings? My mother left voicemails. My father sent texts. They all want control back. Helen nodded. This isn't just about a will. It's about long-term manipulation, financial misconduct, and inheritance fraud. This case is strong. I felt a tremor of fear beneath the anger. If I do this, everything changes. Helen leaned forward. Clara, everything already changed. You just haven't claimed it yet. When I left her office, I felt the shift inside me, a solid weight settling into purpose. As I reached my car, my phone buzzed with a new message. You think you know everything, you're about to destroy this family. Stop before you regret it. No name, no number. But I knew exactly who sent it. My mother. I stared at the message, then at my reflection in the car window, and whispered, the family destroyed itself. I'm just uncovering the truth. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sun had dipped behind the rooftops, leaving the sky washed in muted gold. I sat in the car for a long moment, holding my grandmother's letter in my lap. Part of me wanted to read it again, to feel her voice steady me the way it used to. But another part of me, one I hadn't let breathe in years, was ready to move forward. When I stepped out of the car, someone was already waiting on my porch. My father. He stood stiffly, shoulders squared, as if preparing for a corporate negotiation. His face carried exhaustion, but beneath it was something far stronger, fear disguised as disappointment. Clara, he said, we need to talk. I unlocked my door without looking at him. Inside, then. I'm tired of having emotional conversations on my porch like the neighborhood is an audience. He followed me in, closing the door behind him. He didn't sit. Instead, he hovered near the table where I'd left the envelope open, the edges of the documents visible. His eyes flicked to the handwriting he recognized instantly. He exhaled, the sound heavy with guilt. You spoke to Margaret. I did. And she told you. She did. The mask slipped just a fraction. Clara, your grandmother didn't understand the complexities of estate planning. She thought she was helping you, but she didn't realize the strain it would. I held up a hand. Stop. He froze. Dad. She was perfectly coherent when she wrote that will. She had an attorney draft it. She had it notarized. She made a copy. She put her intentions in writing. You and Mom chose to hide it. His jaw tightened. Your siblings would have been devastated. Laurel and Everett already believed they were falling short. If they knew she preferred you, they wouldn't have known unless you told them. I snapped. You made a choice for all of us, not to protect them, to protect the narrative that the family was balanced, equal, ordered. He swallowed. Your grandmother didn't understand how hard we worked to keep this family from splintering. A bitter laugh escaped my throat. You didn't prevent a splinter. You created one. You let Everett walk around with a superiority complex he didn't earn. You let Laurel believe she could steal from the trust without consequences. And you let Mom convince herself that silence was the same thing as love. He winced. I almost softened, but then I remembered standing in that bank lobby, humiliated in ways I'd endured my whole life without protest. Not anymore. He rubbed his temples, stress tightening every muscle. Clara, if you pursue legal action, it will destroy everything this family has built. No, I said quietly. It will expose everything you built on lies. His breath hitched. And you're not angry at me, I continued. You're angry that I stopped accepting the role you assigned me. He sat slowly, the weight of his own mistakes settling over him like a heavy coat. I wish you had come to me first. Why, I asked, so you could talk me out of it or bury it again. He didn't answer. Then he whispered, your mother is terrified. Of losing me, I asked. Of losing control. There it was, the truth he never meant to say aloud. I stood suddenly calm. Dad, the next steps are legal, formal, transparent. I'm not hiding anymore. He rose unsteadily. Then I can't protect you from the consequences. I don't need protection, I said. I need honesty. He glanced toward the documents again, and for a moment, I saw a man shrinking not from weakness, but from the realization that consequences had finally come home. When he walked out the door, he didn't look back. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Steady. My mother called the next morning. Not with guilt, not with apology. With strategy. Clara, she said, voice steady. Your father told me you plan to challenge the estate. I think we should talk as adults before making rash decisions. As adults, I repeated, letting the words settle. Mom, I'm 33. When exactly did you plan to start seeing me as an adult? She ignored that. Your grandmother's second will was written when she was grieving your grandfather. She wasn't thinking clearly. She became attached to you because you were present. Present, I echoed. You make it sound like a flaw. She sighed heavily. Your siblings had demanding careers. They couldn't always visit her. And I said. And I did. Every week. Because I loved her. That's not what I meant, she snapped, then composed herself. Clara, she didn't understand the long-term tax implications, the property issues. She understood just fine, Mom. And she trusted me more than she trusted you. Silence pulsed on the line. You are misunderstanding the point, she said finally. I need you to drop this for the family's sake. There it is, I whispered. The family's sake. The phrase used every time you want me to carry the burden quietly. She inhaled sharply. You're being dramatic. No, I said, I'm being accurate. Another silence stretched thicker this time. Then she delivered the blow she had been saving. If you go public with this, Clara, people will assume you're motivated by greed. They will assume you're bitter, and you will lose whatever reputation you've managed to build. Ah, there it was. Reputation, the Monroe religion. I smiled to myself, though she couldn't see it. Mom, I don't need people to think highly of me. I need the truth to stand. You don't understand what you're inviting into your life, she hissed. Courts, investigations, depositions. The community will talk. Extended family will talk. I'm done being afraid of whispers. Her tone shifted sharply. Clara, I raised you. I know how sensitive you are. Sensitive, I repeated softly. Mom, I'm not sensitive, I'm perceptive. There's a difference. She didn't like that. I'm giving you a chance to step back, she said. Don't make me choose between you and the stability of this family. My chest tightened not with fear but with clarity. Mom, I said evenly, you made that choice years ago. I hung up. My hands trembled slightly afterward, not from regret, but from the weight of finally saying the words I had carried since childhood. I set my phone down, closed my eyes, and breathed. Mom wasn't done. I knew that. People who rely on silence don't surrender when someone starts speaking. And she didn't disappoint. That evening, a thick envelope arrived, this time from a law firm representing my parents. A formal letter urging me to avoid escalating unnecessary tensions within the family, implying I was misinterpreting my grandmother's intentions. I sat on my couch and read every line slowly, the fire inside me hardening into resolve. They still believed I would fold. They still believed the quiet daughter was the easiest to silence. They had no idea who I had become. As I set the letter aside, my phone vibrated again. A voicemail, this time from Laurel. Her voice shook, not with guilt, but with anger poisoned by panic. You think exposing me will make you admirable? You think being the favorite would have fixed your pathetic life? Go ahead, Clara. Burn the whole thing down. But don't pretend you're better than the rest of us. Her words didn't sting. They confirmed something I had sensed for years. My family didn't love me. They tolerated me as long as I played my part. Now that I refused, they saw me for what I truly was. A threat. I didn't expect the revelation to come from Everett. But life has a strange way of allowing the least trustworthy person to crack under pressure first. He arrived at my door just after sunset. Eyes, red suit, wrinkled, the look of a man who had been cornered all day. When I opened the door, he didn't step inside. He simply stood there, shoulders slumped. Clara, he said quietly, I need to tell you something. I crossed my arms. About what? Your suspension, Laurel's fraud, Mom's threats. He shook his head. About the will. A chill spread down my spine. Everett, I said slowly, what do you know? His eyes glistened with something unfamiliar, shame. Everything. I knew everything. The world seemed to pause. He wiped his face. I was 21 when Grandma died. I overheard Mom and Dad arguing in the kitchen. Mom was crying. Dad kept saying, we can't let this stand. It'll destroy the family dynamic. They mentioned a second will, one leaving everything to you. My breath caught. And you never said anything. I was stupid, he whispered, and selfish, and angry. I thought Grandma choosing you meant she didn't think I'd amount to anything. I didn't want it to be true. Anger flared sharp and hot. So you let them erase her wishes? He nodded miserably. Dad said they'd fix it quietly, that it wouldn't matter because you were too gentle to notice. I didn't know what that meant until recently. My throat tightened. Until you humiliated me. He winced. Yeah. He leaned against the porch railing. Clara, it was all supposed to be simple. They'd file the first will, life would go on, no one would question anything. But then Laurel started helping herself to the trust, and Dad panicked. He didn't know how to discipline her without exposing the truth. And Mom refused to confront her because she didn't want another scandal. "And you," I asked, "where did you fit in?" Everett let out a bitter laugh. "I fit into the role I always fit into, the one who pretended everything was fine as long as it benefited me." He met my eyes. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. Clara, I don't want to be this person anymore." My chest ached not from sympathy, but from the quiet grief of realizing how deeply dysfunction had shaped all of us. I stepped inside and returned with the envelope containing my grandmother's letter. "Read this," I said. He read it slowly, the lines trembling in his hands. When he finished, tears spilled down his face. "She loved you," he whispered. "She really loved you." "Yes," I said softly. "She did. And you all stole that from me." He nodded. "I know." Silence wrapped around us heavier than any storm. Then he said the words that changed everything. "There's another document," he whispered. "One Dad hid. I saw it once years ago. Grandma wrote a statement about why she didn't trust Mom to manage her estate. She listed reasons, things Mom did, financial mistakes, manipulation, lies." My heart slammed against my ribs. "Where is it?" "In Dad's office," he said, "at the house." A single breath left me slow and sharp. This wasn't just about inheritance. This was about truth. Truth my parents had buried for years. Truth my grandmother had tried to preserve. Truth that would unravel every illusion my family still clung to. I stepped back into the doorway. "Everett," I said, "are you willing to help me get it?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." Not because he wanted redemption, but because he finally understood that denial wasn't protection, it was poison. And it had been killing our family for decades. Everett and I hadn't driven anywhere together since we were teenagers, but that night we sat in silence as he navigated the familiar road to our parents' house. Streetlights washed across the windshield, rhythmically slicing through the tension inside the car. I watched him from the corner of my eye, his jaw tight, his fingers white-knuckled on the steering wheel, the weight of years pressing down on him. "Are you sure they're not home?" I finally asked. "They're at a fundraiser downtown," he said. "Mom texted me earlier about it." Of course she did. Even in the middle of a family implosion, she still cared more about appearances than truth. We pulled into the driveway of the house I once visited weekly as a child, but rarely stepped into after adulthood. It looked the same: perfect lawn-polished porch light, curtains drawn just so. But now it felt like a museum of illusions. Everett unlocked the door quietly. The smell of lavender cleaner drifted out, mixing with something colder secrecy. He led me down the hallway to Dad's office. My pulse quickened. I remembered being scolded for entering that room without permission as a child, Laurel being praised for respecting boundaries, Everett being applauded for showing maturity. I remembered feeling like an intruder in my own home. Not anymore. Everett closed the office door behind us. "Dad keeps everything he doesn't want Mom to see and hear," he whispered. "Or doesn't want us to see." I scanned the room. Mahogany desk glass cabinets, framed photos from vacations where I'd always been strategically placed at the edge. The filing cabinet on the left side of the room seemed newer than the rest. Everett knelt in front of it and pulled out a ring of keys. "He changes the lock every year." "Why do you have a key?" He didn't look up. "Because Dad trusts me more than he should." He found the correct key and opened the drawer. Inside were neatly stacked folders, each labeled in Dad's meticulous handwriting. Tax records, trust paperwork, insurance documents. And then beneath a row of manila folders, a single faded blue envelope with my grandmother's handwriting. My heart punched against my ribs. Everett froze. "That's it?" I reached for it, but my hands trembled. Not from fear, from recognition, from the sense that my grandmother was still guiding me. Inside the envelope was a 3-page statement written in her clear cursive. Statement of intent regarding estate distribution. My eyes skimmed the lines. She detailed her concerns about my mother's financial choices. Times she mishandled money. Times she pressured my grandmother for temporary loans that were never repaid. Instances where she belittled my grandmother's decisions, dismissed her concerns, and tried to manipulate her into changing beneficiaries. Then came the final paragraph. "I choose Clara as my primary heir, not because she is my favorite, but because she is the one who sees truth clearly, acts with integrity, and carries compassion not as a performance but as a way of life. She is the only one I trust to preserve what I built for future generations." I pressed my lips together, fighting a wave of grief. Everett read over my shoulder. Clara, she loved you more than any of us realized. Yes, I whispered, and they buried it. A noise snapped both of us to attention. The front door. Everett's eyes widened. They came home early. He grabbed the documents and shoved them into my bag. Go out through the back. What about you? I'll distract them. Everett, Clara, go. I hesitated, but he met my eyes with a rare flash of courage. Not arrogance, not superiority, courage. I slipped toward the back door as footsteps echoed down the hallway. My mother's voice. I don't understand why Everett's car is here. I reached the yard just as the office door opened behind me. Laurel's voice sharp as ice. Why is the filing cabinet open? I didn't wait to hear more. I ran. By the time I reached my car, my breath was shaking not from exertion, but from the realization that there was no turning back. I had taken the truth, they hid the truth they feared. And now the storm wouldn't just break, it would sweep through everything. My phone rang before I even reached the end of the street. My father's name flashed across the screen. I didn't answer. The voicemail arrived seconds later, frantic, strained, unmistakably furious. Clara, whatever you took, bring it back. You don't know the damage you're doing. This isn't just about you, this is about all of us. It was the voice of a man who realized control was slipping through his fingers. Good. I drove straight to Helen's office. She buzzed me in despite the late hour, her expression sharp when she saw my bag. You found something. I handed her the blue envelope. She read through the contents silently, her brow tightening with every paragraph. When she finished, she set the pages down carefully. Clara, this isn't just evidence. This is dynamite. Can we use it? Absolutely. This statement directly contradicts the filed will and supports your grandmother's mental clarity. If we locate even a partial original, your parents are in legal jeopardy. I exhaled a long, shaky breath. They're going to fight. Oh, they'll do more than fight, Helen said. They'll try to smear you, manipulate public perception, reframe this as greed. I nodded. They already started. Helen leaned forward, voice firm. Clara, let me be clear. You have the stronger case, not just legally, but morally. Courts care about intention. Your grandmother's intentions are crystal clear. And my family's intentions, I asked quietly. Helen didn't need to answer. 2 days passed before the next battle arrived. A formal cease and desist letter from my parents' attorney, accusing me of unauthorized removal of private property and attempting to destabilize family assets. I read it while eating breakfast, the absurdity settling into amusement. They were panicking. Good. I sent the letter to Helen, who laughed under her breath. They're bluffing. They know it, and now we do. But the situation escalated when my mother showed up at my house unannounced, a habit I was beginning to resent. She looked polished, composed, and absolutely terrified beneath the surface. She didn't ask to come in. She walked past me as though my home were still her domain. Where is it? She demanded. You'll need to be more specific. Her composure cracked. Don't play games. Your father tore apart the office last night. He's furious. You stole something that doesn't belong to you. That's where you're wrong, I said evenly. It belonged to me from the start. Her expression flickered with something I hadn't seen before, desperation. Clara, listen to me. You don't understand the damage this could do. You keep saying that, I said. What damage to the truth, to the family image, or to the control you've had over all of us for decades? She flinched. I continued, quieter now. Grandma didn't trust you with her estate. She spelled out why. She saw the same manipulation I lived through, the same favoritism, the same silencing. Her voice rose sharp with panic. She was confused. Stop, I said, holding up a hand. We both know she was clearer than you wanted her to be. My mother's face twisted, not in anger, but in something worse, denial crumbling. She sank into a chair. Clara, if you go through with this, the family will never recover. I sat across from her. Mom, the family you're trying to protect never existed. You wanted harmony, but it required me to be silent. It required Laurel to be excused. It required Everett to be elevated. And it required you to pretend your mistakes didn't matter. Tears welled in her eyes. I made mistakes, but I tried. No, I said gently. You controlled, that's different. She covered her face with her hands. Why are you doing this? I hesitated, then spoke the truest words I'd said in years. Because Grandma asked me to. She trusted me to stand up when no one else would. And because I deserved the life she wanted for me. My mother looked up, devastated. But devastation wasn't an argument. She stood slowly, defeated but not accepting. Your father will never forgive you. I met her gaze. Then he'll have to live with that. She walked out the door without another word. Watching her leave felt like watching winter retreat, not gone, but losing its grip. Filing the petition to challenge the will took 15 minutes. The fallout took less than 5. As soon as the clerk stamped the documents, everything began to shift. Emails, phone calls, messages from extended relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Some curious, some accusing, some pretending to care while fishing for gossip. I didn't respond to any of them. Helen and I met in her office to finalize the paperwork. Once this becomes public, she warned, your parents may try to paint you as unstable or vindictive. I'm ready, I said. And I was. The hearing date was set for 8 weeks out. Long enough for tensions to sharpen. Short enough that my family had no time to bury anything else. The night after the filing went public, Laurel came to my house not alone but with Christopher, her husband. His expression was stone. Hers was fury wrapped in fear. You want the house, she spat. Fine, take it. You want the savings. Fine, take that too. But dragging us into court, Clara, what is wrong with you? I didn't stand. You stole from the trust for years, Laurel. You forged documents. Her face reddened. You think you're perfect? No, I said, but I'm honest. Christopher looked at her sharply. Is it true? Laurel sputtered. Christopher, you don't understand. He stepped away from her betrayal, cutting deep. I understand enough. Her fury snapped toward me. You think you're destroying me? No. You're destroying yourself. No one is going to side with you. I smiled faintly. That's what you said when you were caught. How's that working for you? She stormed out in tears. Christopher followed in silence. One by one, the people who had held the highest seats in the Monroe hierarchy were falling from the pedestals they built themselves. But the moment that stayed with me came 2 weeks later. The regional bank director, Anthony Reed, reached out. The internal review had concluded. Everett had been suspended, but not fired. Anthony requested a meeting with both of us. Everett sat stiffly beside me in the conference room, waiting for judgment. Anthony entered with a folder and a composed expression. Everett, your conduct violated policy. However, your self-reporting of additional information regarding the trust investigation has been taken into account. Everett blinked. Self-reporting. Anthony nodded. Your testimony supported an ongoing legal matter involving inheritance fraud. That level of integrity is noted. I glanced at Everett. He hadn't told me he'd reported anything. Anthony continued, your suspension remains, but termination is off the table. Your record will reflect corrective action. When we walked out, Everett stopped me near the parking lot. I didn't do it to save my job, he said quietly. I did it because I'm tired of living the way we were raised. I nodded, letting the truth settle peacefully between us. We weren't healed, but we weren't broken either. The court hearing eventually arrived. My parents sat across the aisle, rigid and unyielding. Laurel kept her eyes glued to the floor. When the judge reviewed my grandmother's statement, the room fell silent. He spoke plainly. The court finds sufficient grounds to investigate the authenticity and suppression of a secondary will. A gasp escaped my mother. My father closed his eyes. Laurel shook. I didn't move. This wasn't victory. This was justice beginning. Weeks passed as the investigation continued. Ultimately, the court recognized the second will as valid. My grandmother's assets, her homeland and savings, were transferred to me. My parents faced penalties. Laurel faced legal consequences. The family image they cherished shattered like glass. But the unexpected part, the more the truth came out, the lighter I felt. Not triumphant, just free. The night I received the final court decision, I drove to my grandmother's old house. I walked through the quiet rooms, letting the memories settle. Her laugh, her stories, the afternoons we spent sorting through her papers. In the far bedroom where sunlight always landed just right, I whispered, I kept my promise. And for the first time in years, I felt fully seen. Not by my family, but by myself. When I left the house, I filmed a message for the channel. Nothing dramatic, nothing theatrical. Just truth. If this story stayed with you, tell me, what boundaries did you have to build to protect your peace? And if you believe in justice and karma for people who hide behind family image, consider liking, commenting, or subscribing. Not for me. But so stories like this keep finding the people who need them. Because revenge isn't always about hurting someone. Sometimes it's about finally stepping into the life that was meant for you all along.